For 3,000 years, the galaxy had known peace. The stars burned quietly, the great empires traded and taught, and the memory of war faded like dust on forgotten ruins. The galactic concord, made of 81 advanced species, held the galaxy in balance. Treaties were sacred, weapons were ceremonial, and Earth, though a young member, was known more for art, science, and humor than violence. Humanity had arrived late but curious, quickly adapting, their restless minds surprising older races. Some found them charming, others unsettling, always watching, always learning. Then, without warning, the silence shattered. A deep space. Listening array near the Lyrian sector caught strange signals, rhythmic, encrypted, ancient. Before anyone could decode them, asteroid clusters appeared, moving with purpose, driven by hidden engines. Within hours, 10 Concord worlds were attacked, orbital stations torn apart, and millions gone. The attackers sent one chilling message in a language only humans recognized. The Cathari return. The harvest begins. Panic swept the council. The Cathari, a race believed extinct for millennia, had been erased from records for their cruelty. No one knew where they had gone, or how they returned so suddenly and so strong. Their ships were bone white and shaped like knives, their weapons pulsed with black energy, and they ignored all hails. The Concord scrambled defense fleets, but they were slow, outdated, too peaceful. Worlds fell like dominoes. Then came the real shock. The Cathari turned toward Earth. Ambassadors begged the humans to flee, hide, surrender, anything to avoid their destruction. A special session of the Concord Council was called. Holograms flickered in the air, showing burning cities and crumbling moons. "Humanity must run," cried the Valari Prime. "They are not ready." But Earth's representative, a middle-aged woman named Ambassador Wren, leaned back in her chair and smiled. "Tell the Cathari we'll be ready in 2 days. Don't worry." The chamber fell silent. Some thought she was joking, others that she was mad. The humans requested no help, accepted no protection, and turned off all long-range broadcasts. The Concord watched helplessly as the largest Cathari fleet ever seen began its approach toward the solar system. But Earth stayed quiet. No evacuation, no cries for help, no fleet mobilized. Just silence. But in that silence, deep beneath Earth's surface, ancient bunkers opened. In orbit, satellites blinked awake. On Mars, black ships rose from the red dust, their hulls still bearing old war markings. And far beyond Pluto, a station once thought, abandoned, lit up like a small sun. Inside, old generals stood from cryopods and stretched, their eyes sharp, their voices calm. "Took them long enough," one of them said. On Earth, factories built not for peace began humming again. Assembly lines moved faster than any other race could imagine. Weapons not seen in 3,000 years were cleaned and activated. AI networks linked like a forgotten hive, and deep learning war minds rebooted with a single order: defend. As the Cathari entered the edge of the solar system, Earth did nothing. No messages, no action. The aliens thought it fear, but inside their ships, strange things began to happen. Systems crashed. Lights flickered, alarms blared without cause, invisible signals struck them, learning them, copying them. Then, without warning, a single ship dropped from hyperspace, a Terran dreadnought, the Vigilant Silence. It did not speak, it did not warn. It simply fired once, a beam of focused light that sliced through 3 Cathari cruisers like paper. The Cathari hesitated for the first time. Then Earth sent its message, simple and cold. "Your move." Across the galaxy, the Concord watched, stunned. Humanity, the quiet ones, the artists, the thinkers, they had not forgotten how to fight. They had only been waiting. The news of Earth's unexpected counterattack spread through the stars like wildfire, echoing across Concord space with disbelief and awe. The Cathari had lost 3 warships in an instant, struck down by a single Terran dreadnought that had remained hidden for centuries. While the alien fleet paused on the edge of the solar system, Concord leaders gathered in quiet panic, trying to understand what had just happened. For generations, humans had shown no interest in war, rarely speaking of their past battles and never displaying true military strength. Their museums told of ancient wars, but only as sad reminders. Now, it was clear they had never forgotten. They had simply hidden their power well. Yet on Earth, there was no panic, no fear. Instead, there was laughter, not madness, not arrogance, but something calm and sharp, like a blade sheathed with a smile. Across the planet, massive underground doors opened, revealing vast factories, powered by geothermal cores. Machines that had been silent for millennia began to move. From orbit, nothing seemed to happen, but below, humanity prepared like a hive awakening. Men and women trained in simulations at speeds impossible for other species, guided by AI commanders who remembered every war humanity had ever fought. On Mars, mobile defense units the size of cities crawled out of hidden vaults, reassembling into towering weapons platforms with the click of robotic limbs. Earth's moon, long thought to be nothing more than a peaceful science station, revealed its true nature when entire sections of its surface rotated, unlocking massive hangars filled with sleek ships marked only with serial numbers and the Terran defense seal. These were not shiny parade vessels. They were made of dull black alloys, resistant to scans, built for one thing: war. Concord spies hidden among human cities sent terrified messages back to their homeworlds. They're not afraid, they're organizing, and they're smiling, one Velari observer whispered into his recorder before vanishing off the grid. In a secret command chamber beneath the Atlantic Ocean, General Riker, commander of Earth's dormant fleet, stood before a glowing tactical display surrounded by his old team. Warriors awakened from cryosleep, their minds sharp and voices steady. They didn't talk of survival. They talked of strategy, of prediction, of how fast the Cathari would fold. "We show them what 3,000 years of preparation looks like," Riker said, his eyes never blinking. The Cathari fleet moved, closer, regrouping after the loss. They sent another transmission, this time mocking. "You think one ship changes the tide? We are the storm." But humans didn't respond. Instead, probes launched silently from the dark side of Saturn. These weren't simple scouts. They were ghost drones, invisible to most sensors, built to slip through shields and transmit data without detection. Within hours, they mapped the enemy's entire fleet and relayed it to Earth's command. Meanwhile, civilian life continued as normal. Children went to school, markets opened, and humans smiled a little more than usual. But everywhere, people were ready. Every citizen had received a message through their neural implants. Stand by, activate contingency code Polaris if needed. Those words, once part of history class, now came to life. Veterans put on old uniforms. Engineers received sealed blueprints, and in deep space, human colonies shut their doors and turned their cities into fortresses overnight. The Cathari still believed they had the upper hand. Their fleet outnumbered Earth's visible ships 10 to 1. But that was the mistake every enemy had made in the past, thinking only numbers mattered. One Cathari tactician, after scanning Earth's defenses, laughed and said, "Let them smile, it makes our victory sweeter." But hours later, that same tactician watched in horror as a human war satellite, once thought to be space, junk, activated a planetary shield system no Concord species had ever seen. It surrounded Earth in a glowing web of energy, not built to block, but to trap. Then came the first full strike. From hidden stations orbiting Jupiter's moons, Earth launched a fleet of interceptor drones that used solar gravity slingshots to reach the enemy in record time. They didn't attack directly. Instead, they hacked into Cathari systems, feeding them false locations and looping their own surveillance data. Confused and blind, several Cathari ships fired on each other, mistaking their own fleet for human targets. By the time they realized the deception, more dreadnoughts appeared, 5 this time, each with a distinct emblem from humanity's long-lost military branches: Navy, Air Force, Orbital Guard, Solar Marines, and Deep Space Black Division. Their arrival was not loud. It was silent and precise, like shadows moving in space. Each one targeted a specific enemy command ship. The strikes were surgical. No civilian areas hit, no stray fire, just complete elimination of threat. The Cathari realized too late that Earth had not only been preparing, it had been evolving, building not only machines of war, but strategies, technologies, and soldiers capable of fighting enemies who had never been seen. While conquered species had trusted peace, humanity had practiced in silence, turning theory into weapons, games into drills, and memory into readiness. As the battle lines formed, the Cathari hesitated for the first time, not from fear of ships or weapons, but from the realization that their enemy was smiling not from arrogance, but confidence. The same kind of confidence that comes from knowing something the other does not. General Riker looked out at the growing fleet above Earth and gave one command to his officers: "Initiate Protocol Echo. Let's finish the warm-up." The storm hadn't started yet, but the humans were already walking through it, smiling. The Cathari had never feared anyone before, not during their ancient conquests, not during their exile, and not during their sudden return. They were a warrior race, born in fire and raised in war, believing strength came from domination and fear was a tool, not a feeling. But now, as their fleet floated at the edge of the solar system, confusion began to grow into doubt. Their sensors kept failing, their formations broke under false alerts, and the enemy, the humans, refused to follow any known pattern of war. Instead of clashing head-on, human ships danced like ghosts, attacking from odd angles, vanishing into shadows, reappearing with perfect timing. Every time the Cathari prepared for battle, Earth seemed one step ahead, and it was not just strategy, it was how humans fought. In one battle near Neptune's rings, a Cathari destroyer was boarded by a dozen human soldiers wearing exosuits the color of deep space. They moved like wind, never speaking, using hand signals and neural links. The ship's defense systems couldn't track them. The soldiers cut through bulkheads with silent plasma tools, bypassed every trap, and disabled the core without firing a shot. Then they left, leaving the ship floating powerless. The Cathari crew never saw their faces. That was the moment some began to whisper the word phantoms. In another system, an entire fleet of Cathari warships lost contact for 10 minutes. When they came back online, all their weapons were disabled, navigation systems rerouted, and encrypted files wiped clean. There was no sign of attack, only a single message on every screen: "You're not ready." Rage turned into frustration. Supreme Commander Varkal of the Cathari swore vengeance and ordered a full assault on the Mars base. But when their ships arrived, they found the red planet had changed. No longer just a colony, Mars had transformed into a fortress. Its surface shimmered with active camouflage, hiding massive railgun arrays, anti-ship missile nests, and energy shields buried under the soil. When the Cathari fired, Mars didn't even move. It absorbed the attack, then responded with such precision that 4 enemy cruisers were destroyed before they could blink. The Cathari thought it was a trap, but it wasn't. It was just Earth's second line of defense. Inside the enemy ranks, fear took hold slowly. It wasn't panic, it was quiet, creeping, cold. Soldiers whispered about how humans knew where they would strike, how every ambush failed, how nothing seemed to surprise Earth. Some said the humans were using time-bending tech. Others claimed they had spies in every system. The truth was simpler. Humanity had studied war like an art, and every possible move had been mapped, predicted, and planned for. But the Cathari didn't understand that yet. They still believed in brute force. So they sent their biggest ship, the Ash Claw, to attack Earth directly. It was the size of a small moon, armed with gravitational cannons and pulse disruptors, guarded by elite warriors bred for spaceboarding. As it approached Earth, Terran satellites tracked it with no fear. It began charging its main weapon, preparing to strike at the heart of human command. Then the sky above Earth opened. 3 human stealth carriers decloaked, each one shaped like a dagger of night. They moved faster than any Cathari sensor could lock onto. A coordinated strike followed. Precision torpedoes slipped through shield gaps measured down to a single atom. The Ashclaw's engines failed first, then its weapons, then its command. Bridge. A virus spread through its core systems, freezing AI and life support. By the time the Cathari realized what was happening, it was over. The Ash Claw did not explode. It shut down and drifted, cold and dead. The crew was captured, alive, and placed in cryo by human ships. They were sent back to the Cathari fleet in perfect stasis, unharmed, as a message. This is mercy. Varkle stood in silence as the pods arrived. He opened one, his best warrior, eyes wide open, frozen in terror. The Supreme Commander clenched his fists. It was no longer about winning, it was about understanding what they were facing. In a war chamber deep inside the Lid Cathari warship, the Council of Battle gathered. For the first time in thousands of years, they considered retreat. One of the elders, ancient and scarred, spoke a truth no one wanted to hear. They laugh not because they are arrogant. They laugh because they do not fear us, because they do not need to. Somewhere across the stars, in the shadows of Earth's moon, General Riker watched the enemy with calm eyes. He saw their movements, their hesitation, their desperation. And he knew the moment would come. The moment when the Cathari would realize the war they thought they started had already ended. Not with fire, but with silence, planning, and smiles that hid steel. The Cathari came to conquer, but now they were learning to fear. The halls of the Galactic Concord, once filled with calm discussion and quiet diplomacy, now echoed with unease as the member races gathered to face a truth they had never expected. Humanity, the youngest of them all, had become something none of them fully understood. For thousands of years, the Concord had lived in peace, slowly growing into a grand civilization that valued knowledge, culture, and balance. War was not forgotten, but it had become distant, studied in archives rather than fought in space. So when the Cathari returned in fire and fury, most believed Earth would be the first to fall. Instead, it was the Cathari who bled. It was Earth that struck back with cold precision and terrifying silence, and now the Concord watched. Through hidden probes and fractured reports, as the war turned into something else, a quiet hunt where the humans were the predators. In the main chamber of Concord Prime, the 81 species sat in silence, staring at the latest footage. From the edge of the solar system, Cathari ships floating lifeless, human vessels moving like shadows between debris fields, and Terran soldiers walking among twisted wreckage without fear. Ambassador Tilari of the Velari stood slowly, her voice calm but strained. This is not the humanity we knew. They were scientists, artists, explorers. They laughed easily, shared their knowledge freely. This is something else. No one replied. Across the room, High Speaker Zahn of the Dravari touched the edge of his long robe and leaned forward. They did not change. We simply never saw the full picture. We believed peace softened them. We were wrong. The Concord had always considered humans harmless. Their jokes, their curiosity, their strange love for danger, it had been viewed as a cultural oddity. But now, those traits looked different. Their laughter was sharper, their silence heavier, their technology more advanced than anyone had guessed. Worse, it seemed they had been hiding it all. Not from fear, but from strategy. Every Terran weapon used in the battles was custom-built, designed for specific purposes, and utterly unfamiliar to Concord scientists. Ships built to bend radar, AI networks that responded before enemy commands were finished, energy weapons shaped like light and shadow. No Concord fleet had ever seen such things. And the worst part was that Earth had made no announcements. No threats, no explanations. They simply acted. Ambassador Juno of Earth had not returned to Concord Prime. Her seat remained empty, a quiet reminder that humanity no longer needed to explain itself. When the Villari proposed sending aid to Earth, they received a polite refusal. When the Dravari offered to study human war tech, Earth said, perhaps after the war. It wasn't arrogance, it was control. The Concord, once the heart of the galaxy, was now watching from the side, and as they watched, a deeper fear began to grow, not of what Earth would do next, but of what Earth had already done. Old treaties had loopholes. Long-lost star systems near Terran space, once ignored, now seemed to pulse with secret activity. Concord historians discovered that nearly half of humanity's colonies had gone silent decades ago, claiming peace and distance. Now they were lighting up one by one, each revealing their own fleets, their own tech, their own readiness. Earth had not just prepared, it had prepared everywhere. Hidden fleets, silent outposts, forgotten stations now active. The humans had built a web of strength across the galaxy while smiling, while shaking hands, while pretending to be harmless. The Concord's trust had been real, but the humans had always kept one hand on the sword. Some called for emergency meetings. Others demanded Earth reveal the full extent of its weapons, but no one could force them. The humans had already proven that they didn't need permission. What scared many leaders most was not that Earth was powerful, but that it was so calm about it. No parades, no threats, no demands for tribute or land. They fought only the Cathari, and even then they fought with strange rules. No unnecessary deaths, no damage to conquered worlds, and prisoners returned unharmed. It was war with precision, not cruelty, but it was still war. And the Concord was no longer sure it could keep up. In private, some wondered what would happen after the Cathari were gone. Would Earth return to peace? Or would they reshape the galaxy? On a distant Concord outpost near the Helisari Vale, a group of scientists monitoring deep space communication picked up a strange signal, short, quiet, and encrypted in a way only Earth used. When decoded, it showed coordinates and one phrase: Defense Line 3 activated, no action required. The coordinates pointed to a dead star system that Concord maps marked as empty. Within hours, Concord ships sent to investigate were turned away by human drones, polite, firm, and unmoving. Restricted sector. Please return, they said. And that was that. The realization hit the Concord slowly. Earth was no longer asking for trust. It was simply moving forward. High Chancellor Revek of the Council finally spoke after long silence. We thought ourselves the caretakers of peace. We thought war had made us wise, but perhaps it only made us blind. The chamber remained. Quiet, the stars outside shining cold and distant. Earth had always smiled, but now the Concord understood. It had been the smile before the storm. And the storm, they feared, had only just begun. The skies over Earth glowed faintly as the solar shield pulsed with light, catching the last wave of dust from the shattered Cathari cruisers drifting at the edge of the system. And while the stars remained silent, every human eye was watching, not with fear, but with steady resolve. In orbit, massive Terran warships continued to move like shadows on water, sleek and controlled. as if every action had already been calculated before the enemy had even made a move. On the ground, cities thrived in calm readiness. Children played. Near bunkers without fear, markets stayed open beside shield walls, and families gathered around news screens, not for panic, but to watch, to understand, to support, and to remember. In command centers buried under continents, holographic maps pulsed with movement, not in chaos, but in cold, focused control, and General Riker stood at the center of it all, hands folded behind his back, eyes locked on the latest enemy formation. Massing near the moons of Jupiter, the Cathari had sent reinforcements, not because they thought they could win, but because they believed humans would tire, would flinch, would blink first. But they were wrong. Earth didn't tremble. It waited, it studied, and then it moved. Before the Cathari fleet could strike, a deep space relay network hidden within the asteroid belt activated silently, sending high-frequency pulses that disabled half the enemy. Sensors without a single shot fired. Terran ships followed, not in a rush, but like wolves circling prey, choosing the right moment to strike. One by one, key enemy ships were cut from their support, their engines fried by directed EM bursts, their missiles misfiring thanks to drone swarm interference. Within minutes, a full enemy squadron lost control of their own targeting systems and fired into the void, hitting nothing but dust and echoes. The Cathari tried to regroup, but even then, Earth didn't blink. Instead, it tightened its grip. From a dark corner of space near Saturn's rings, 4 new Terran vessels emerged. Not dreadnoughts, but command spiders. Warships designed not to destroy, but to hack, confuse, blind. They sent out pulses in layered rhythms, causing confusion in enemy ranks so deep that captains thought they were being attacked from inside their own ships. Cathari crew turned on each other. AI cores rebooted endlessly, and escape pods launched. Without warning, believing their ships had been boarded. All the while, humanity stayed quiet. No taunts, no boasts, just action, unseen and sharp. Above Earth, inside the orbital station Eden 9, Terran High Command met in a silent room, lit only by floating maps and data trails. No raised voices, no fear, only purpose. They spoke in short phrases, analyzed movements, prepared contingencies, not because they needed to, but because they were trained to never stop, to never assume it was over. On the diplomatic channels, the Concorde sent another message, asking for Earth's intentions. There was no delay in the reply. Our goal is simple. End the threat. Nothing more. And that was the truth. Humanity wasn't fighting for revenge or pride. It was fighting because it had to, because it had waited long enough, because it knew what unchecked violence became. And so it acted without hesitation, without blinking. In a last, desperate attempt, the Cathari launched a scorched earth strategy, sending suicide drones toward human colonies beyond Pluto. But before the drones reached even halfway, they were intercepted by defense. Grids that no one in the Concorde even knew existed. Layered networks of sentry satellites and smart mines that could shift orbit within seconds. Every drone was neutralized before entering critical range, and Earth's response was not anger, but redirection. The closest Terran fleet changed course without orders, without pause, and launched a silent insertion mission to the Cathari. Command world, hidden in a distant nebula. They didn't announce the attack. They didn't seek approval. They simply arrived, breached the outer shell of the planetary station using gravity torpedoes that mimicked meteors, and disabled its power. In one coordinated strike, no civilian lives were lost, no collateral damage, just silence, followed by submission. The Cathari command surrendered not because they were broken, but because they finally understood. Humanity would not blink, not under threat, not under pressure, not under fear. They would move forward step by step, thought by thought, like a machine made of flesh and will. In Conquered Prime, the revelation sent ripples through every council. Old powers watched in awe, in fear, in wonder. Some had mocked humans, others had doubted them. Now they saw the truth. Earth had never been sleeping. It had been watching, waiting, preparing, and when the moment came, it acted with such calm, terrifying certainty that no one could stop it. Back on Earth, in quiet fields untouched by the war above, children looked at the sky and traced the shapes of ships with their fingers. Veterans stood at city gates not in armor, but in memory, knowing they had passed the torch well. The people didn't cheer for victory. They didn't chant. They simply nodded, went back to their work, and waited for the next message, the next call. Because Earth didn't blink. Earth listened. Earth learned. Earth endured. And now, as the final phase of war approached, every species in the galaxy realized the same truth. You could threaten humanity. You could attack them, challenge them, test them, but you could never shake them. Never break them, and never ever expect them to look away. Across the galaxy, silence fell, not from fear, but from memory, a deep and echoing stillness that reached even the oldest corners of space, where ancient empires had once ruled and fallen. And now every race, every world, every species turned their eyes toward Earth, not in mockery, not in doubt, but in quiet respect. The war was over. The Cathari fleet had been broken, not with overwhelming firepower, but with quiet strategy, with calm resolve, and with a patience the galaxy had never seen before. What had started as a bold, violent return by the Cathari after 3,000 years of peace had ended with their surrender, not only in battle but in spirit. Their warriors now walked among humans as prisoners treated with dignity, not crushed, but changed, their eyes no longer filled with rage, but with something they had never known, understanding. Across the Concord, ambassadors whispered among themselves, scholars rewrote their histories, and leaders gathered in deep chambers to speak not about who had won, but what it meant that humans had chosen not to destroy. Humanity had every chance to wipe the Cathari clean from the stars, to show dominance with fire and steel, but instead, Earth held back, striking only when it had to, building bridges where others would have built graves. On Cathar Prime, now under Terran watch but left standing, the skies were quiet and clear, and for the first time in generations, the Cathari elders opened their temples not to prepare for war, but to ask how peace was meant to feel. They had come believing they would crush the soft world that laughed too easily, that shared too freely. But what they found was a species that had simply been waiting, learning, evolving, never forgetting what war looked like, but refusing to let it rule them. The galaxy watched all this and began to remember, not just the war, but everything before it, all the little warnings they had missed. The way humans had studied every race without fear, the way they had mastered languages faster than any species before, the way they built alliances with words instead of threats, and how they never asked for more than they gave. It all made sense now. Earth had never been weak. They had simply chosen not to show their full strength. Their cities, once thought quaint and small, were now seen as testaments to balance. Their technology, once underestimated, was now the blueprint of quiet power. Their soldiers, once seen as too emotional, were now praised for their control. In the halls of Conquered Prime, a statue was raised, not of a warrior or a ship, but of a simple Terran explorer, holding a datapad in one hand and a flower in the other, a symbol of Earth's strange way of walking into the stars with curiosity and courage at once. The inscription at its base read, "They smiled before the storm and stood still through its roar." In deep archives, the story of the war was recorded in every tongue, but the tone had changed. This was no longer a tale of battle alone. It was the story of restraint, of a force that refused to become a monster even when it had every reason to. On distant worlds, young minds studied Earth's tactics not to copy them, but to understand the thinking behind them. Patience, precision, purpose. And in quiet corners of space, where shadows once ruled, pirate fleets and rogue colonies now hesitated, speaking in low voices about the humans who could end a battle before it began, who didn't boast, didn't shout, and yet were heard louder than any empire. Even the oldest races, those who had lived through 100 wars, now saw Earth as something new, not conquerors, not saints, but guardians who chose to carry the burden of strength without turning it into tyranny. General Riker returned to Earth not to a parade, but to a small ceremony in a quiet garden, where he placed his service badge beneath a tree planted during the first Terran moon landing. "Let this be the last war," he said, not to cameras, but to the soil, and the wind carried his words farther than any speech could have. Humans went back to their lives, rebuilding where needed, restoring what was lost, and never letting the fire of victory become pride. They spoke little of the war, not because they were ashamed, but because they understood the cost. Every Terran family had someone who had served, and they remembered, not the fight but the stillness before it. And across the galaxy others began to remember too. They remembered how quickly Earth had responded, how deeply it had planned, how clearly it had seen the threat before anyone else. And they remembered how, when the moment came to strike the final blow, Earth had instead extended a hand. It was not weakness. It was wisdom. From the burning moons of Talos Reach to the silent observatories above Glacian 5, murals appeared showing the human eye, not wide with fear, but narrowed with focus, always watching, always thinking. They became a symbol not of dominance, but of readiness, of balance, of the truth that peace was not the absence of war, but the presence of those willing to defend it with care, not chaos. And so, long after the last Cathari ship had been grounded, long after the final satellite drifted back into silence, the story of humanity spread not like fire, but like music, quiet, constant, unforgettable. The galaxy remembered the day. Earth stood still while the storm passed around it. The day they didn't blink. The day they chose to be more than powerful. They chose to be wise. And from that day on, the stars looked a little different, because now they shone not just with light, but with memory, with the knowledge that somewhere, on a small blue planet that once laughed too easily, a force had risen that did not conquer, did not demand, but simply waited, watched, and acted only when the moment was right. And the galaxy would never forget.